Decimals are very closely related to fractions and percentages, and before students can really truly understand decimals, they have to have a very solid conceptual understanding of fractions because decimals, like fractions, represent part of a whole. And specifically, a denominator that has a multiple of 10. So in fourth grade, we typically talk about tenths and hundredths, and then in sixth grade math, we go up to the thousandths. So since decimals are so closely related to percentages, I tend to teach them in conjunction. So as students are understanding a decimal or a fraction with a denominator of 100, then it's easily translatable to understanding percentages. The place value chart is essential for students when they are learning to read decimals because it is directly related, and I will show you that on the next few slides. So here we have one whole that is split into 10 pieces. So this is tenths. That's something students can understand. Here we have 8 tenths filled in. That's the fraction, and then that's the words. On this slide, we have a whole that is split into 100 pieces. So this is hundredths. And then a fraction, 23 hundredths. So getting students to be able to understand, the tenths and hundredths, saying it out loud, writing it as a fraction is very helpful for the decimal understanding. This is the place value chart that students have been introduced to up until this point. It goes from ones to millions. But then here, we are adding the decimal point, and then we're adding tenths, hundredths, and thousandths behind. So typically, we're going to stick with tenths and hundredths in fourth grade again, but as students get older and progress through their math, they will need to understand thousands, etc. Okay, so this is the new part that students have not seen before, but they need a lot of practice and exposure to this place value chart to understand decimals. All right, here I have 8 tenths filled in again. Okay, we have the 8 tenths, and then here in the place value chart, they can fill in that 8 in the tenths place so that they can start to understand that all of these represent the same fractional part. All right, so same thing here. Okay, now talking about hundredths, we have this hundredths, I would call this 23 hundredths, okay, in words, and then I am writing it there. So this takes a little bit more practice and understanding with the students because this place value chart kind of works in the opposite direction of the whole numbers that they are used to. So just seeing this and seeing that practice will help them. So I also like to tell them, okay, when we're looking at the 2 in the tenths place, we do kind of have 2 tenths there. If you look at that, the 20 hundredths is equivalent to 2 tenths, and then we have 3 more hundredths, which would go in the hundredths place in our place value chart. Okay, and we'll talk more about that on these next few slides. So again, we have tenths, okay, hundredths, and what's important here is that students understand that you could split a whole into tenths or hundredths. But again, if they have that firm or fraction conceptual understanding, then decimals will be the same for them. Okay, here I have this fraction, okay, and then it's the same here. So we can start to talk about, for example, here we have 8 tenths is equivalent to 80 hundredths. And this is where that rule comes in where you can drop the trailing 0. Just telling students, oh, you don't need to worry about the 0 at the end is confusing for them because with whole numbers, a 0 at the end is certainly very meaningful, where 8 is very different from 80. But in this situation, showing them a visual and giving them lots of practice with seeing why the trailing 0 does not matter in this situation is very helpful for them to develop that conceptual understanding. Okay, now let's move into a more difficult example where students are adding decimals together. So telling them just line up the decimal point, of course, is something that I say, and that's helpful to the students, but showing them a visual can help really solidify that understanding. We've got 2 tenths and 46 hundredths. So when we add fractions, we always say you can't add the fractions if they don't have the same denominator. But with tenths and hundredths, it's easy to kind of combine them like I've done here. So I've got those 2 tenths and then the 46 hundredths to equal 66 hundredths. So again, this takes practice. I print off tenths and hundredths charts as I have here. I print them off and put them in a sheet protector so the students can shade in and match that to a place value chart. Okay, and here this is represented in those fractional parts as well. So I've got the 2 tenths plus the 46 hundredths equals 66 hundredths. So students do need the visual, and they also need practice seeing, the tenths and hundredths and understanding how you would combine those together.